What's going on, guys? My name is Arrow, and in today's video, I am showcasing my build of the league. Let's go. So let's start with the one disclaimer that I have for this build. You have to have in the 5th slot of the Crucible tree on both your weapon and your shield the additional projectiles for Soulrend and Essence Drain node. This is mandatory, so you don't have to run GMP in your main setup. You can run GMP until you get these. That's what I did. It was fine, but when you want to blast endgame content, kill all the invitations, and really do juiced up maps, you want to have the 2 tier 5 nodes. Now, I put this build together with just the tier 5 nodes. All of the other nodes that I have on the way for both my wand and my shield are absolute garbage and do nothing. Some of them are even just downsides, like one gives me a bunch of strength that I don't need and removes all of the benefits of strength, which is like minus 100 life or something. My wand and shield are trash trees. I only just wanted to get the mod on there to see how it felt, and then the build turned out to be so good that I blasted through the entire game without having good trees. So the limit on this build, way higher than what it currently is. There's no question that with investment, you could take down Ubers, you could do all sorts of great stuff with this build. So what does this build do? We are using Spellslinger. Now, I've never made a Spellslinger build before, and I actually thought that I came up with this idea. Turns out Chaos Slinger used to be a big thing in Path of Exile, but as someone who doesn't usually follow the meta, I had totally forgotten that it even existed. So the main difference between what I know the Chaos Slinger to be and what this build is, we don't use Contagion. We don't spread Essence Drain using Contagion. We only use Essence Drain as a damage source and a huge source of our regeneration. Essence Drain, when it hits for a duration, will give you an amount of the damage that you dealt as regen life. In this build, it is so much that you really don't even need any other source of life recovery. So we're using Essence Drain and we're using Soulrend. We have 5 projectiles each, thanks to the Crucible tree nodes. And we fire these projectiles in a Nova. For some reason, this ring has fallen out of favor. I imagine Vengeance Cascade is a big part of it, but Vengeance Cascade doesn't apply to spells. There's so many spells out there that work really, really well with Nimis. I'll probably be making more than one build using this ring this league, so stay tuned for that. But this ring, I paid about 3 divines for it at the time for a near perfect roll. This was week ago or so. And this enables us to fire 10 projectiles in kind of a Nova at enemies in every direction. All of these projectiles then turn. And because of the nature of Soulrend and Essence Drain, they will fly effectively infinitely. One of the downsides that I've heard about this build from folks that were watching were say the projectiles look really slow. Now, the way that Soulrend works is as it moves through a pack, it pulses and deals AoE damage around the projectile as it goes. It has a very short duration of chaos damage, and then it can reapply it if it's still nearby the enemy. Having a slower Soulrend projectile isn't necessarily a bad thing. It actually keeps higher uptime of damage on single target. When you're mapping, we have Poison Prolif, and we also have Explode from Azanath's Gentle Touch Gloves. So you don't need really fast projectiles to make this. If you wanted to try to invest into it, you could, but I didn't find any really easy ways to get more projectile speed, so I just didn't. So we fire all those projectiles, go out to the edges of the screen, come back to us, through us, and then back off the screen again. The coverage of this build is incredibly good. I've been doing very, very juiced content. I did 80% deli maps. I've been doing juiced up Harby maps. And then I did all of the invitations in the game. including the Feared. Now, I died a few times on the Feared, but skill issue. I cannot begin to express how good this build feels to play. It's like an Ethereal Knives style of build, except it has real single target potential. On top of that, we have unbelievable recovery Essence Drain skill gem. To give you an idea of how tanky this build is, I leveled from 96 to 98 with 1 death. Only death was a random rogue exile who walked up to me, hit me once with a poison, despite the fact that we're actually at 76 chaos res, killed me in less than a second. It's just one of those things where if you don't have poison immunity, every once in a while you're gonna get one of those massive poisons. And it was only 1 stack. But we have tons and tons of defensive life. This build has 1 weakness, which we'll get to. But for starters, we are a Pathfinder. We're using 3 different elemental flasks to take our elemental damage and reduce it by about 30-something%. We have evade cap. We easily reach 95% evade cap with a 30C Watcher's Jewel. We then have 40 block, which means we are almost never getting hit with attacks. When we do, if they're elemental, which most attacks in the game these days have some sort of elemental component, we're reducing that damage a ton as well. We're also crit immune from the poison mastery, which means there are no big hits against us, which means we're pretty much never going to die to those one-shots because we have big mitigation. And then when we take 1 hit, it can't be a crit, and then we instantly recover. The one weakness of this build, and I wouldn't even really call it a weakness, it's physical damage. You get hit by a pure physical hit that is a high roll, you can get 1 shot. I would not play this build as is hardcore, but for softcore, this is a giga tank. I regularly shield charge into the middle of packs, have 100 attacks and spells cast at me, and you don't even see the life. Like I said, 1 death from 96 to 98, doing juice maps. It was a lot of fun. So I'll stop bragging about how much fun this build is. So there are a lot of moving parts in this build, and I'll try to talk about each gear piece, how they all work together, and ways that you can craft them. So make sure you stick around to get all the information if you plan to play this build. So let's start with the weapon. This was a few divines for the base. You can go for a lower roll and get one for 20C. In order to craft this wand, you need to get a base that has some damage over time fraction on the suffix, and then you use Shuddering, Corroded, and Metallic Fossils to roll for +2 of Chaos and Spell. There's a great video by Captain Lance that I'm going to link down in the description that gives you a step-by-step instructions on how to make this exact wand. But effectively, you finish your prefixes, and then you can lock the prefixes, use a Veiled Chaos Orb to reroll the suffixes. And for me, I wanted to get the trigger a socketed spell on using skill. You can craft this on, but it's an 8-second cooldown. I wanted to upgrade to the 4-second, so I did. You may not get it on the first try. I think it's like a 38% chance to hit it. So if you do go for this and you want the 4-second, just remember you might have to spend a few re-rolling. And the reason that we do that is we have Despair in our weapon. So every 4 seconds, Despair will cast, and we also use Hex Bloom. What Hex Bloom does is it transfers hexes when an enemy dies. So it's automatically casting, and as things die, the hex spreads to all the enemies. It's super satisfying. It's really, really effective, and it pretty much automates our curse without giving us reduced effective curses. I also have an increased area of effect on here. That makes the mana cost pretty high, so you don't have to use this, but I found it to be a lot. So that's the weapon. Lastly, we'll talk about the reason I have crit chance for spells on here. This is not a crit-based build. However, there aren't a lot of good suffixes that you can craft onto a wand, but this crit chance is actually useful for us. This node right here, Careful Conservationist, gives us 20% increased flash charges if you failed to crit recently. This gets our crit up to about 10%, and we're casting so many spells per second that you're going to be critting. And this just ensures full uptime of Careful Conservationist, so our flasks are always go. On top of that, I have Tailwind if you've dealt a critical strike recently on my boots. This is not necessary at all. I actually can barely feel this, but I bought these boots as is. We might as well try and see if we can have consistent uptime of Tailwind. And it's pretty much 100% now that I have the increased crit chance for spells on. Next, we'll talk about the helmet. Things that you want to get here, you want to get life, you need to get some mana reservation efficiency. You only need 1 roll here, so you can either do the implicit or you can do it with an essence. I originally had both, and then I finished the build and realized I had way too much reservation efficiency. So you can drop one of those. Getting some fizz taken as here is really, really nice because like I said, physical damage is our only weakness, and we take so much less elemental damage between our resists and our less damage taken that any fizz that you convert to Ellie is basically going to be removed. A good spell suppress roll here is the mana reservation efficiency of Spellslinger. That's pretty much mandatory. We have 2 5-link Spellslinger setups, therefore you pretty much have to have them. Our shield, there's nothing special going on here. You want to get some spell suppress. I chose to use a shield that has base block on it because evasion plus block is so effective at high levels. 95% chance to block means we hit 1 in 20 hits. And then 40% of those that get through our evasion then get blocked. Those layers work together so nicely. So I highly recommend going for suppress and block on the shield. And then chaos res, nothing exciting here. Talisman, you can go for +2 here, but I didn't want to spend too much currency. I'm not even using these reses right now, so this is actually a trash item for me. It just got some dot multi and +1. I then used a talisman organ thing on it for hit spell damage. Our other ring, this is also not that exciting. Basically what I wanted here was a bunch of damage. So I took an Iolite ring, I put Chaos Catalyst on it, and then I just rolled Essence of Envy for increased chaos damage until I hit the res I needed, a little bit of life, and crafted some ES. This is a nothing ring, but I highly recommend doing this to fix, some res problems. If you have it, you probably won't, but if you do, you can use that. We are way overcapped on just about everything. Our reses, as you can see, 135, 110, 161, and then we're 20 overcapped on chaos as well. So definitely overkill in that department. The boots, I mentioned these briefly. Basically what you want here is movement speed and CDR. The goal of CDR is to hit the 30 breakpoint. With more investment, you can get more. I'll include a link in the description that has a little chart that tells you how much you want to get, but nothing too exciting on these boots. If you want to try to get Tailwind, you can. You can make these yourself as well, but Tailwind together with the of shaping CDR mod, finish them off, lock, suffix it, failed chaos to try to get some speed. Stygian Vise, I bought this for a couple of divines. This is like a perfect item for us. Got tier 2% life, tier 2 max life, increased chaos damage, and then it has CDR 15. Again, we're trying to get to 30, so we have 15 here, 13 here, and then a jewel has a little, Abyss Jewel. And then lastly, the most important thing on this belt after CDR is regenerate 150 energy shield per second while a rare or unique. When we are fighting trash, you cast once, it uses that much ES, and then everything's dead around you. Sometimes you got to cast twice. When you're fighting a boss, you're going to have to do this, right? You're going to have to get your stacks up, and that is going to use a lot of your ES, and it's just so much ES. But this mod alone will solve your single target recovery. It's super nice. I've used this on builds before. This is really nice tech. We have the Asenath's Gentle Touch Gloves. You want to get some sort of implicits on these because they're so cheap, but this gives us Temporal Chains, which is a huge damage buff for us because we're all dot. It gives us Explode, and then it gives us some int and some life. Lastly, the star of the show is the Nimis ring. These are super cheap right now. I don't know what it is today. It looks like they're about 4 divines right now for a roll. Shut all that off. 3 divines. This is an incredible item for 3 divines. If you're not playing an attack, the only way to get return is with Nimis, except for a couple of Crucible nodes. So this is a really strong item. Let's go over the flasks. These are super important. You can get an idea of how long your flask charges are going to last by looking in PoE. What I recommend is getting reduced charges per use. The idea there is we have tree, recover 4% of life when you use a flask. Because we are constantly using our flasks when we fill up to full, the less charges that you use, the quicker you'll be able to go back to 100% and use it again, and the more times you're going to be recovering life just using it. There are often times where I don't have an essence drain buff on an enemy, so I'm not regenerating life, and I got hit by something. You just mash your flask. You have a ton of uses, and it'll heal you right back. Super nice. So these flasks are up all the time. These first 3 are 100% uptime, and then these last 2 are not 100% hideout. But when you're actually in game and you've crit recently, you'll have Careful Conservationist up, which means you're going to be gaining increased charges, and you'll have full uptime on all these flasks. So the first one, You want charges reach full on all of them. I've been putting quality on these because I've been running June missions. So 22 and 24, nothing too exciting. Adds like a third of a second. Number 1, mana cost of skills during effect. Mandatory. You have to have this on one of your flasks. Our stuff is so expensive. We are casting tons of spells. Essence Drain is 36 mana. Soulrend's 42. Despair is 136 with this increased AoE on it. So we are spending a lot of mana all the time. You have to have reduced cost. The next one, we have a Ruby Flask. This one has some increased movement speed. Again, reduced charges, very nice. This one has Ellie Res during effect. If you get enough res on your gear, if I had like 1 roll on my gear, I could drop this and still be overcapped by 50 on everything. So if you go that route, you absolutely can drop that. We have a Quicksilver Flask with increased evasion. We are at 95% evade chance, so you want a really nice roll here. And then lastly, we have a Jade Flask with evasion, and this total gets us up to 100% reduced effective curses with our flask effect. So we are also curse immune. Let's talk about the gems. So we talked about Despair and Hexbloom. Go to the helmet. We have a Malevolence here. This is connected to a blessing. Press this in 15 seconds or so, you get a massive damage. Because our skill is a dot-based skill, it's not so bad to stop casting for a second and to hit your Malevolence. We also have Frenzy and faster attacks on here. This is how we trigger our spells. We attack with Frenzy. This also gives us Frenzy charges. And see how it casts all of our projectiles. On the shield, we have Immortal Call and cast when damage taken. Just a really nice defensive bonus. We have some other interesting tech in here that I think is really underrated. Putting a Void Sphere on a low level cast when damage taken means you're going to have Void Spheres out all the time, pulling enemies in and keeping them away from you. Generally, when an enemy is close to you, if you put a Void Sphere down, they won't redirect or try to do anything else. They'll just try to keep running at you, and they'll just be slowed and pulled to the center, which means they're effectively just standing there. This is super nice defensively. It's also nice offensively because when it bunches enemies up, your explosions kill everything in the... In our boots, we have faster attacks and shield charge. This build loves to shield charge around. It's super quick, so I really like that. We have a Frost Blink in here in case we need to traverse any ledges. So we actually don't use regular haste, just the Vol version. Gives us a little bit more movement speed. In our gloves, we have Grace, as well as a Plague Bearer linked to increased area of effect. Plague Bearer is just a little bit more damage. I generally don't use it while mapping because I don't like it, but you actually can just play as a Plague Bearer build if you really enjoy the feel of it. You can just turn on Plague Bearer, run through. As soon as it ends, you attack 1 time and cast all your spells, you'll be at max Plague Bearer. So it really is just a nice damage boost that I use for single targets when I need it. Otherwise, I don't enjoy it. And lastly, we have a Withering Step. Withering Step is just a really nice way to get our Wither stacks up early. And then we'll get into how we get to max Wither stacks when we talk Ascendancy. So lastly, we have our 6-link setup here. We have Soulrend. It is level 28 at the moment. You also could be running an Empower here. We'll talk about in a second. So we have Soulrend and Essence Drain. Both of these gems apply a dot to enemies. They also do damage when hit, which means using the Cosprey's Will chest that says always poison on hit against curse enemies, the first projectile is going to hit the enemy and curse it. It's going to apply the dot of either one of the projectiles that hit it. And then the next time it's hit, which is either on the return or by the next projectile that you cast, that is going to then poison the enemy. We are hitting with so many projectiles between the dots of both of these skills and poison. I have no idea how to calculate the actual damage of this build. Whatever it says in PoE, ignore it. But I can tell you that with the gear that I have, I easily took down all invitations in the game and 80% deli. So these two are linked to Spellslinger. Spellslinger is a cooldown-based skill that allows you to cast spells when you attack with a wand. We attack with Frenzy. It's these two spells. We use Cruelty support. While mapping and in a non-boss content, we have 40% cruelty up all the time. During bosses, we have somewhere between 20 and 35% cruelty. I didn't want to spend the money on an Empower, but if you put an Empower here, it's basically the equivalent of having 40% cruelty up at all times. So It's only slightly better, and I didn't find the damage to even be necessary. I killed the Feared with a Cruelty in. So this skill gem that is usually something that people dog on is actually quite good in this build. Then we have Awaken Unbound Ailments and Awaken Isolation. This level 5 mandatory. It gives us another +1 and no downside. Let's jump into the Ascendancy real quick. Nature's Boon, magic utility flasks have increased effect. This is fantastic. Master Alchemist gives us removes elemental ailments when you use a flask. I actually don't have ailment immunity in this build outside of this, and I never have ailments on me. You could go for ailment immunity if you want to, but I actually don't recommend. This feels fantastic. And then 50% chance for flasks to not consume charges, huge. We also take Nature's Adrenaline, more flask stuff. We grab Nature's Reprisal. So this is where the rest of our Wither comes from. We hit so much that this is always going to have us at max when you combine Withering Step. And then increased effective Withered is a huge multiplier for kill. Lastly, I added this relatively recently. I'm not sure that it's 100% worth it. It adds about 14% more damage according to PoE, which who knows how close that actually is. We do get more damage with poisons. It doesn't affect the dots of Soulrend or Essence Drain, but it does affect the poison portion of the hit. And then it gives us Poison Prolif, which I also don't know how good that is. I basically put it into test and then I just never changed it. They were 3 divines for both of the jewels combined, so not a huge cost, but I'm not entirely sure it's necessary. You could just use, you could maybe get +2 projectiles from Deadeye. You could take Onslaught stuff from Raider. I don't know how good this felt, but you can try it out for yourself if you want. Let's talk about the tree. We'll start up here. We are Eldritch Battery, as you can see. The clusters are super important because these are just so strong. Wicked Paul, Touch of Cruelty, and Unholy Grace I found to be the best combination of 3. And you actually want to take this as well because it gives you a little bit more attack speed. Attacking quickly just feels better. We have 4 different nodes here. We have Student of Decay, Wicked Paul, Flow of Life, and Circling Oblivion. I think the best one is actually Wicked Paul and Flow of Life for us in particular, but those were crazy expensive, so I just bought some other ones. You want to get Corrupted Blood into the build. Phasing also feels really nice. I highly recommend that because as a poison build, things don't die the second you hit them, so a lot of times you do damage, enemies are dying. It may only take a half a second, but if you start to run again, you might just run into them, so definitely get phasing build. We take a lot of the damage over time stuff. Steeped in Profane, fantastic. Huge amount of damage, and it allows you to not get a perfect flask if you wanted, or curse effect. Our Watcher's Eye, this was, I think I paid 30C for it, plus 8% chance to evade attack hits. This gets us exactly to 95% chance to evade. This is phenomenal. You can also get some Malevolence nodes on here. More damage over time, more damage over time. I take piercing shots for 2 reasons. Our Essence Drain doesn't pierce naturally like Soulrend does, so getting 3 pierces means that your Essence Drain is hitting targets for clear, which feels nice, but more importantly, projectile mastery of 15% more projectile speed makes the projectiles go a little bit faster. You want to get blind from the curse mastery. That helps us get to 95%, and it's guaranteed for the first 4 seconds. Curse an enemy. As soon as the curse wears off, you can reapply it. Our body armor is the Cosprey's Will. It has no life modifiers on it, which means we get to use the 15% increased life. Fantastic node. Enemies poisoned cannot deal crits. You have to have this. It's so strong. We get a little bit of movement speed from this mastery. +1. This mastery messed me up a little bit. So +1 to level of all chaos skill gems. Super strong. You lose 10% of life in ES when you use chaos skill. And I thought, all right, I use Frenzy. I don't use chaos skills, so I'm fine, right? Well, we also use Withering Step and we also use Plague Bearer. So if you're not paying attention, if you've just lost a bunch of life and then you cast both of those things, you might think that you're dying. But the reality is when you're hitting things with Essence Drain, you won't even notice that your health is going down from casting those things. So that's pretty much it. This is the most fun build that I have played in a long time, and I truly recommend it. If you're looking for something that can really do all content and excel pretty much at all of it, this is a fantastic build. As far as cost, all of this together was probably about 30 divines, maybe a little bit less. And that includes some unnecessary things like these boots that I paid 4 divines for that pretty much just have tailwind on them. Getting this double corrupted chest was very easy. I think I paid 20C for the chest, and then 6 linked it myself, so it probably cost me a total of 150 chaos. The cool thing about these gems is both Soulrend and Essence Drain are projectile, duration, and AoE tagged. So any of the 3 of those is going to give you +2 for both of your main skills, which means getting a cost breeze with that is essentially free. So I chose to get +1 max res on it. I would have liked to get +4, but there weren't any on the market that were reasonable. But if you can find one, definitely snag it. There is no hesitation from me in saying that this was absolutely my build of the league, and if you play it, I hope you enjoy it. If you have any questions, you can comment down below or come over to my Twitch, twitch.tv/AER0___. I am live almost every single day. If you want to support me, like this video, subscribe, and comment down below. If you want to support me financially, you can check out my Patreon. That is also linked in the description. Thank you so much. And as always, take care.